is 4K or, even 8K actually doing anything useful for our eyes? Or have we basically hit a wall where upgrading is, well, literally invisible?
Well, this deep dive, it's mostly based on this really compelling new study. It focuses squarely on the biological limits of the human eye versus this constant pixel race we see from TV and monitor makers.
Right, the push for more and more pixels.
Exactly. And the mission here, following these researchers from Cambridge and Meta Reality Labs, their work was published in Nature Communications, was to find that exact tipping point. Where does extra resolution just become pure marketing, expensive marketing?
Yeah, finding that point where you're paying for something you can't even see. That's the key. We've got the analysis right here, and apparently the answer really boils down to one kind of simple factor.
Yeah, viewing distance, it's all about how far away you are.
And this is where it gets really interesting because, well, the findings might make some of us rethink our last big TV purchase.
Might just do that.
Okay, so you walk into any electronics store, right, and it's 4K this, 8K that. 4K is like the baseline now. 8K is what they want you to want.
It's everywhere.
But this study, it seems to suggest that for a normal living room setup, couch, TV across the room, that ultra-high definition, it's often just unnecessary.
Yeah, what's really fascinating in the modeling they did, they took a really common scenario, a 44-inch screen viewed from about 2.5 meters away.
That sounds pretty standard, maybe 8 feet or so.
Exactly. The very typical living room distance.
Yeah.
And in that setup, participants simply could not tell the difference. Not between QHD, which is 1440p, not between that and 4K, or even 8K. No difference detected. And they found pretty much the same thing with a slightly bigger 50-inch screen viewed from 3 meters, about 10 feet.
Hang on a second, though. If a 4K is pointless at that distance, why did I, and probably millions of other people, notice such a big jump when we went from our old 1080p TVs to 4K? Was that just us wanting to see it?
That's a really great question. And it ties right back to, the physics of light and how we see. The difference you likely saw wasn't just the raw pixel count.
Oh.
Think about it. When you upgrade from an older 1080p set, especially one maybe 5-10 years old, to a new 4K model, you're not just getting more pixels, you're getting upgrades across the board.
Like what?
Better brightness, much wider color ranges, and maybe most importantly, significantly better contrast. Blacks are blacker, whites are brighter. That's huge for perceived sharpness.
Okay, so if I buy a cheap 4K TV versus a really high-end one, the real difference I'm paying for isn't necessarily the 4K label itself, but more the quality of those blacks and whites and colors.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that connects to what Professor Rafah Mantiuk, one of the researchers, pointed out. This whole pixel race is just inefficient.
How so?
Well, screens with, frankly, too many pixels, they cost more to manufacture, obviously, but they also demand a lot more processing power. Think about your graphics card, the streaming bandwidth.
Right, you need better gear to even push all those pixels.
Exactly. Why pay for an 8K signal if you need a super expensive GPU and maybe faster internet just to render detail that your retina literally can't resolve from your couch anyway?
So, bottom line for the living room then, what did the lead author, Dr. Malia Ashraf, say?
Her conclusion for that specific scenario, average distance, average size screen, was pretty blunt. Paying extra for those ultrafine pixels is, quote, a waste because your eye cannot really detect it.
A waste, wow.
And this is really important, we have to add the caveat about screen size. This finding, that extra resolution is superfluous, that really holds true for smaller sets, say under 55 inches.
Okay, so what happens when you get bigger? Like a 55-inch, 65-inch, which are pretty standard now.
Then 4K does start to make sense. It becomes useful, even necessary at typical viewing distances. And 8K, that really only starts to potentially offer a benefit when you get above 65 inches, maybe 75 or larger.
And that makes sense geometrically, right? A bigger screen, same distance away, it fills more of your vision.
Exactly right. It covers a wider angle in your field of view. So you need more pixels packed into that angle to keep the image looking sharp, to avoid seeing the pixel grid itself.
Which leads us perfectly into how they actually measured this stuff, doesn't it? This idea of pixels per degree. PPD.
That's the metric they used. PPD. It's key to understanding all of this.
Okay, before we get into the new numbers they found, what is a pixel per degree? Why is that a better way to talk about sharpness than just saying 4K or 8K?
Right, so think about your field of vision. Imagine holding your thumb out at arm's length. The width of your thumb might cover about 1 degree of your vision, roughly.
Okay, I can picture that.
PPD measures how many individual screen pixels fit side by side within that single degree of visual angle from your eye's perspective. It's clever because it automatically accounts for both the screen's resolution and how far away you are.
Ah, so it's not just about the pixels on the panel, it's about how dense those pixels appear to you given the distance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A tiny phone screen held right up to your face could have a very high PPD, even if it's not 4K, while a massive 8K cinema screen viewed from the back row might have a surprisingly low PPD.
Gotcha. So it's a measure of the actual sharpness you perceive.
Precisely. Now, for over 100 years, the accepted standard for human visual acuity, basically our sharpness limit, was based on that old Snellen eye chart from 1862. You know, the one with the eye doctors.
Yeah, the big E at the top.
That one. That standard estimated our limit at about 60 ppd. The thinking was anything sharper than 60 pixels packed into 1 degree of vision was essentially invisible to the average person.
Okay, 60 ppd was the old number, but this new study says that's wrong.
Completely updates it. They found our eyes are actually much, much better than we thought, especially when it comes to seeing fine detail.
How much better?
Well, they use mobile screens, very carefully controlling the viewing distance to pinpoint the limit. And they found the average perception limit is actually way up at 94 ppd for images based on grayscale contrast, just black, white, and shades of gray.
94? That's more than 50% higher than the old 60 ppd standard.
It's a huge jump. And we also scored pretty high for simple red-green patterns, around 89 ppd. Still much better than 60.
Okay, that's impressive. But you said there was a surprise in the data.
There was. When they tested perception for yellow-violet patterns, the number plummeted. It dropped way down to only 53 ppd.
53. So we're great at seeing fine black and white detail, pretty good with red-green, but kind of terrible with fine yellow-blue detail. Why the difference?
It comes down to the biology of the eye. You've got two main types of photoreceptors, rods and cones. Rods are mostly for detecting light, dark, and motion, essentially contrast. Cones handle color. We have way more rods, and they're incredibly sensitive to fine spatial details, especially in high contrast black and white situations. That's why we hit 94 ppd there. Our cones, though, especially the ones tuned to blue and yellow light, they're spaced a bit further apart on the retina. They're just not as good at picking up superfine color variations.
Huh. So our brain really struggles to see tiny color details compared to sharp contrast edges.
That seems to be the case.
And that just hammers home why things like OLED and mini OLED are so popular, doesn't it? Because they focus on maximizing that contrast, the deep blacks and bright highlights. That contrast is really what gives us that feeling of sharpness, maybe more than just raw pixel count.
Absolutely. Contrast seems to be the primary driver for perceived sharpness based on these findings.
Okay, so the study kind of dismisses 8K for the typical living room, calls it potentially wasteful. But then, paradoxically, the same study seems to completely validate super high resolutions for a whole different group of people.
That's right. PC users, gamers, professionals, anyone sitting close to a monitor at a desk.
Why the difference?
Again, it comes back to that fundamental factor, distance. In the living room, we're talking meters away, maybe 8-10 feet. At a desk, you're much, much closer, maybe 40 to 60 centimeters.
So like 2 feet or less.
Exactly. And that short distance completely changes the PPD calculation. It breaks the assumption that we've already maxed out our visual acuity.
Okay, so let's apply those new limits we just talked about, that 89 to 94 PPD threshold for sharpness. Let's apply that to a desk setup, say a standard 32-inch 4K monitor. If I'm sitting, say, 60 centimeters away, what's the PPD?
Well, according to the kind of calculations the researchers used, a 32-inch 4K monitor viewed at 60 centimeters only gives you about 57 ppd.
57? Wait, but you said our limit for contrast is up at 94 ppd?
Precisely. That standard 4K desktop setup, it actually falls below the newly measured limit of human perception.
The image is actually blurrier than what my eyes are capable of seeing at that distance.
Technically, yes. You might still be able to perceive the pixel structure, or aliasing, especially on fine text or diagonal lines. This explains why people doing really detailed work, graphic design, coding, CAD, often still crave higher resolutions on their monitors.
Okay, so that's where 8K comes in for desktops.
This is where it becomes genuinely useful, not just marketing. If you switch that 32-inch monitor to an 8K version, keeping the same 60-centimeter viewing distance, the PPD calculation jumps way up.
How high?
It goes up to around 113 ppd.
Wow. Okay, so 57 ppd for 4K, but 113 ppd for 8K at that typical desk distance, that's a huge jump.
It is, and it's well above that 94 ppd threshold.
Yeah.
So the qualitative gains, smoother lines, much crisper text, finer details, it becomes real and perceptible in that close-range context.
So for desktop users, especially professionals or serious gamers sitting close, ultra-high definition like 8K isn't just hype, it's actually providing a visible, measurable improvement.
Exactly. It's geometry demanding more pixel density because the viewing angle's so wide when you're that close, it's a genuine step forward.
And I guess that logic goes even further for something like virtual reality, right? Where the screen is literally millimeters from your eyes.
Absolutely. In VR, the distance is so small, the developers are aiming for incredibly high resolutions, like 16K per eye, eventually. The goal there is to completely eliminate what they call the screen door effect.
That's where you can see the little black lines between the pixels.
Yeah, makes it feel like you're looking through a mesh screen. To get rid of that entirely when the screen is that close, you need an astronomical PPD. As distance approaches 0, the PPD needed approaches infinity, theoretically. Hashtag tag outro. So, wrapping this all up after quite the deep dive, I think the critical takeaway here is pretty clear. Resolution isn't some universal good.
Right. More isn't always better.
Exactly. Its actual usefulness, whether you can see the difference or not, is completely tied to geometry. It's about screen size and viewing distance. This study gives us pretty solid proof that sometimes, more pixels really is just a waste. A waste of money and a waste of computing power.
And we also learned something really fundamental about how we see, didn't we? Our eyes are just way, way better at picking up fine grayscale contrast, that 94 ppd level, than they are at seeing tiny color details, which drop down to 53 ppd for yellow-violet.
Which really underlines why, for that living room TV, focusing your budget on great contrast technology like OLED or good mini LED might give you more bang for your buck than just chasing the highest pixel count.
Makes sense. Focus on what your eyes are actually good at seeing.
And it raises an interesting question for you listening right now. Think about your own setup at home. Your TV, your monitor.
Yeah.
How big is it? How far do you usually sit from it?
Yeah.
The researchers mentioned maybe putting an online calculator out there based on their findings. It makes you wonder, are you already pushing past the limits of what your eyes can resolve? Or maybe are you paying a premium for pixels that are literally invisible to you from where you sit?
Definitely something to think about next time you're looking at screens, whether it's a TV for living room or maybe that 8K monitor for your desk finally makes sense.
Food for thought.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into screen resolution and the amazing, sometimes limited capabilities of the human eye. We really hope this analysis helps you make some more informed choices.
Hope so too.
You can find this discussion and other explorations on Le Podcast de Philippe. And hey, if you found this useful, we'd really appreciate it if you could help us reach our goal of 2,000 subscribers. Please consider sharing this with your friends or anyone you know who's puzzled by pixels.
Every share helps.
Absolutely. Until next time, thanks for listening.